Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, it's transfer rumour mill season, and it wouldn't be a transfer window without Aston Villa being linked with Weston McKennie, would it, mate? How you doing?
Mate, it's Groundhog Day. What year is this?
It's
Mate, it's
2019,
ridiculous.
bro. I'm taking credit for this transfer if it ever happens because it all started with that rumour mill that we did years back, mate.
It's very true. It's very true, mate. Um, yeah, I just said to you, mate, I was like, I think for the benefit of us, the fans, the clubs, the player, if we could just all decide whether or not this is true or not. I always wonder with these like transfer stories that like ramble on for ages, like whether that gives them more like validity or not. Because I think, this is clearly something that makes you think that there's something in this, doesn't it? If it keeps coming back almost every single transfer window. But then again, it's very rare that you see this really, like a transfer saga that's dragged out genuinely over years. And I'm not saying it's a saga, but like a story that keeps recurring for like 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden the club act on it and pick him up. It doesn't happen too often, especially not with Villa, because it's the bane of our lives that our transfer business is so often done completely behind closed doors, and then all of a sudden it pops up with a day or so remaining that we're almost there, and then boom, the players through the door. So I don't know what to make of this one, mate.
Yeah, it's a strange one. The news broke from DiMarzio, and there's been so many other clubs that have been linked to Weston, and it's understandable why. He had a really impressive World Cup, played 4 games with the USMNT out in Qatar, and was a part of a really dynamic, fluid, and incredibly well functioning midfield that consisted of Tyler Adams from Leeds, Yunus Musa, who was formerly of Arsenal and is actually English, but declared to play for the United States. And McKennie nicely rounded out that trio. It's a really, really good midfield, and they are going to be a problem come 2026. Mark my words. If you're not familiar with Weston, again, I'm sure you would have seen him at the World Cup, especially up close. He was really good in that England game, mate. If we're being
Yeah.
completely honest, I thought he ran the show. And again, not just him, but the other two, Adams and Musa, absolutely fantastic in nullifying Jude Bellingham in that game. That was probably the only game that you could say throughout the whole tournament that Bellingham was probably questionable in. And I think it's because he almost met his match really in that midfield. And McKennie's an interesting one, mate, because he's had his career trajectory. It hasn't quite gone as he would have hoped, or as Schalke would have hoped, who initially sort of took the punt on him. And he never really looked out of place in the Bundesliga. And as we've said on many podcasts before, mate, Bundesliga to the Premier League is a difficult jump. Bundesliga to Serie A, though, isn't the biggest jump in quality. If anything, the Bundesliga is probably better overall than Serie A. I don't think that's a controversial opinion at all. And he's joined Juventus. He's been at the Bianconeri for a while now, and he just hasn't taken off yet. And it feels like now he's got some positive momentum behind him after that World Cup. And we all know what a World Cup does for players' transfer values and for potential moves. January, Weston McKennie has to leave Juventus if he wants his career to absolutely explode and propel him into the spotlight that like he should be in, because he is a player that has bags of potential, and at 23, 24, he hasn't quite realised it yet, and it's not too late just yet. But whilst there is this forward momentum, as I've alluded to, mate, it's important for Weston personally that he gets this next move right.
Yeah, I think, you and I have spoken before about how it felt like he perhaps missed an intermediary club.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That jump from Schalke to Juve felt really big, and it felt like there could have been, say, an Aston Villa in between. And it's like it's really interesting. And I think it shocked a lot of people at the time that he went straight to Juventus. But hey, like, can you ignore that if that's on the table? Like, I imagine when you're at Schalke and all the troubles that they've had as a club, the prospect of Juventus seems a rather nice one, I'd imagine. But to be honest with you, if I was him, I would do absolutely anything to get out of Turin and playing for Max Allegri right now, because the football they play is horrid. It is rancid. It is turgid. To be a midfielder in that side, it's got to be tough. And he's had real moments of like quality. I seem to remember he scored at the new camp, and he's had moments like that in the Champions League where he stood up for Juve. Obviously, he played really well at the World Cup, and he has these flashpoints, and it's clear that there's a player in there. I don't think that stylistically Juve has been a great fit for him, and individuality is not something that's in the Max Allegri playbook, shall we say, and McKennie shines on that. I think he needs to be given the responsibility, and he needs a role in which he can thrive and show himself and express. He's got a real personality in his style of play, and I think he needs to have a manager that is, he can express that within. And he's been linked to the Villa for the longest time, and it's interesting that that seems to transcend managers, and perhaps it's someone more upstairs that's calling for this deal. Say if we had an American in a high place of influence at the club, maybe that would Mr. Wes Edens, good evening. Maybe that would help, in this sort of thing. And it'd be interesting to see what's pushing this deal forward if it is true. I like the fit stylistically, and this upcoming game against Wolves has shown that we are perhaps light in that 8 position, because there's rumours that apparently McGinn and Douglas might be out. And although we've seen McGinn play in that sort of more forward 10 position, those 2 injuries accompanied with, JJ being out, all of a sudden we start to look really light in that portion of the pitch, considering it looks all but over for, unfortunately, the likes of Morgan Sanson and Marvelous Nakamba at Aston Villa, who haven't been picked in the longest time. All of a sudden that spot does perhaps open up.
It does, mate, and that's the thing. Like, how many times do we come on this podcast and preach? You don't buy squad players; you make squad players by signing better players. And I think there probably is a debate to be had as to whether Douglas Luiz and Boubacar Kamara are better players than Weston right now. I think that's a fair debate, and I would probably agree and say that the midfield pairing that we currently have at this moment in time are better players. However, you add another youngster into that position with the experience that Weston has and the ceiling that we know he has and the ceiling that we've seen, then it seems to me like a no-brainer. It absolutely improves the squad and the depth as well, as you say, mate, which is really important. The numbers aren't too impressive this season. And as you say, mate, Juventus having a horrid time. It's funny because they were so hell-bent on getting Allegri back and Allegri being the saviour, and it's just not happened. And there's rumours that they don't even have the money to sack him either, which is why he's still in the job. I mean, where do they sit in Serie A? They currently sit 3rd, so they've won the last 5 games in the league, but there were times they were languishing in sort of 10th, 11th place. And I mean, if you look at the table and if you've seen how AC Milan and Napoli have been playing so far this season, I mean, Napoli have a 10-point swing on Juve at the top of the table. So that's how bad it is if you are a fan of the old lady. So it's understandable why Weston would want to move out. Again, stats this season haven't been too impressive, but again, that's conducive of the style of play that Allegri's been playing and the sort of the restraints that has been put on Weston's game. But he's got 1 goal and 1 assist in the league so far this season. He's managed 2 goals in the Champions League as well. So, we know that he can step up on the biggest stage and he can sort of stake a claim and really make that position his own. And I think he's probably a bit misunderstood in this Allegri system, because he generally does like to play with 2 6s and not in a double pivot fight style. We're talking like Jose Mourinho, 2 6s that are going to defend, going to sit in deep. And Weston is certainly a player who probably would enjoy and thrive in the freedom of a double pivot that has one of either Boubacar or Douglas Luiz in, probably leaning more towards Bouba and Weston's a partnership, in my opinion. And that's something to consider again as well. Obviously, Douglas Luiz did an interview today and came out saying how happy he was to be at the club and how much he's enjoying his football and specifically the style of football that we're playing now. But we'd be naive to think that Arsenal may not come in for a second bid, and his head, could potentially be turned by that. So this is another reason why it's important to get this done. Transfermarkt have him valued at around the 30 million euro mark. It would probably cost about 25 million pounds, 30 million pounds to get this deal done. But I think that's probably the best use of 30 million that we could probably spend in January, mate. Because again, how many times have we said the striking situation, we don't really know how to resolve that. But this 30 million pounds guarantees the squad improves if you bring Weston McKennie in my opinion.
Yeah, totally, mate. Totally. Juve are in. Yeah, I mean, you've got to give them credit for that patch of form that boosted them up to third. But make no mistake, it has been a poor season this year for them. And Weston's only played 3 90 minutes, I think, in Serie A this year. But it's a season that's seen them dumped into the Europa League. Obviously, you remember they had that crazy swing in the last game against Benfica
Yeah,
that took them out, and the way that group H, I think it was group H, yeah, group H turned on a sixpence in like the matter of minutes was crazy. And then obviously that campaign included losses to Maccabi Haifa. They've lost to Monza away as well this season, which is like a historical result in Serie A for all of the wrong reasons. And you sort of go into this window where his club side is not a great place to be. Obviously, the entire board resigned before the World Cup as well at Juventus over sort of alleged whether the allegations were true or not, we don't know. But the whole board, from Agnelli to Nedved, everybody resigned just before the World Cup. So that is a club that's not in a good spot at the moment, as you say. Probably would have sacked Allegri if financial constraints allowed. Um, so it seems like a pretty good time to get out of there, to be honest with you. And I think it would be interesting to see how he could potentially come in and maybe upset that midfield pairing a little bit, because we all know that if you go and you spend that much money on a player in January, would be Unai Emery's first real signing. Um, you have to give him the minutes, and
yeah,
that's surely what you're going to be promising him. And like, you go and put that kind of money on a player, and you give that manager his first real signing, especially in the January transfer window. That's a lot of money to go and spend. You have to then reward him with the playing time, and I don't think Stephen at home is going to cut that, really. I think he's going to want to play big boy minutes, and so it'd be interesting to see which player was expendable perhaps in that midfield. And I think the answer is probably Dougie Luiz. This transfer was actually touted back in December as a potential swap deal with Emi Martinez. And it makes me laugh, the amount of swap deals you see reported in the papers, considering they literally never happen ever in football.
yeah,
Even like when you get like Pjanic and Arta, that swap deal between Barca and Juve that happened just a few years ago, even that wasn't actually sold as a swap deal. It was two deals that were supposedly independent of each other. They literally never happened. But I think it was Football Mercato was suggesting that Emmy could go the other way. So this is not necessarily new. This has been going on for a month or so whilst he has been at the World Cup. So yeah, let's see what happens this month, mate.
absolutely, man, absolutely. And like, I think what's important as well. At the moment, Fulham are winning their game 1-0. They're currently sat in seventh on 28 points. Should Villa beat Wolves, obviously you could be listening to this after, so maybe we have. If Villa win that game, they're on 24 points. That means we're 4 points off seventh place. And what is seventh place? It's Europa Conference League, right? I'm fairly sure. So, listen, I'm not saying that we're going to make European football by any stretch of your imaginations, but should Villa somehow clutch up and finish seventh, which will be very difficult because the sort of the top half of the Premier League is just it's. I mean, look at where Liverpool are. Like we're competing with that. I mean, Liverpool are bad, but obviously they still beat us. You're going to need a squad, so it makes sense if you can try and get this done. I think this gives you so much forward momentum. He stands tall at 6 feet, adds verticality to this side, which I think is something that we miss. A physical presence in the side, and when you look at the sort of the aerials, comparing that to players in the current Villa squad, he's actually exceeds Boubacar Kamara, which surprised me considering his height, Douglas Luiz and John McGinn. He's won 56.8% of his aerial duels throughout his entire career. Boubacar Kamara only 55.8%, so it's marginal, but it's still more. And it just, that, like, I just can't stress enough how good this guy is and how good this guy can be. And it's one that I've wanted for years. Like, literally, you guys can go back. We did a transfer rumor episode. The way we used to do it, there'd be one link, and then either Dan or I would throw a player in that we want, and we tell you about it. And I threw in Weston McKennie, and I've wanted it ever since. And it's
Hey,
not
mate, I
quite
tell you
happened
what,
yet.
if we could sign Weston McKennie and Rodrigo De Paul, and that is a midfield pairing of the two signings we've been championing for about 3
It is. It
years.
is. You've been on the DePaul hype for ages, mate. And we should probably talk about DePaul briefly because there have been links. This will be a YouTube short. Rodrigo de Paul to Aston Villa. We're late to the party. It doesn't matter. This isn't happening. There is no way Rodrigo de Paul is coming to Aston Villa. The sort of the headlines we're reading. Aston Villa, really admire Rodrigo de Paul. Yeah, do you know who I admire? Mila Kunis. That's obviously going nowhere, is it? Rodrigo de Paul is a World Cup winner. He has got no business making his next move from Atletico Madrid to Aston Villa. However, I do find it a weird one because I don't know where he goes from Atletico,
Mm-hmm.
because you would think with the type of player he is and just how brilliant he is and how much money he would cost, I genuinely feel like the only club that could afford to go and get him are Real Madrid. And it's not very often that a player crosses the divide. I know Courtois did it in recent years, but I just don't see that happening. And especially as he's been touted as Lionel Messi's bodyguard. I don't see De Paul going to a Real Madrid. So I would love Rodrigo De Paul, mate. I know you adore this guy so much. You've been on him years before, mate. You watching Udinese and where else was it? Atalanta, maybe somewhere in Italy.
Yeah.
Fantastic player. But there is no chance Rodrigo De Paul comes to Aston Villa, right?
Yeah, unfortunately not, mate. As much as it pains my heart to say, this guy was an absolute football manager gem back when he was at Racing Club in Argentina, and it's always great when you see them like their stock rise. And it was at Udinese where I was really clamoring for some interest, and there wasn't a fat lot, to be honest with you. But no, I think sorry, I suited him wonderfully, and I think he could come back there. I actually think he's wonderfully Max Allegri. If there is some sort of football triangle effect to take place. But yeah, I mean, a man can dream, mate. But Agent Emmy has done it before, mate. He lured Emmy Buendia to the club. Maybe he's got some business in getting a few more of those Argentine boys here as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's I forget the name of the guy, but I mean, obviously we missed out on Julian Alvarez, who we all know went to uh, Manchester City, and Emmy famously tried to get him in. There's a lad who City are signing. I think it's Velez Sarsfield. I think that could be his
Yeah.
name. Also from River Plate, and it's like Enzo Fernandez. He's about to make a £138 million transfer to Chelsea. Can't we just buy somebody from River Plate? What can't we? Can't we get in there early? Like, why can't we miss that on Alvarez? Fernandez obviously went to Benfica. Surely we can take one of these Argentinians before they get their springboard club moved. You know what I mean? Like, we can be that for them instead of them going to a Benfica or Udinese or wherever it may be, and then them going for like 50 million to 100 million euros or whatever it is. Like, that's what I want to see.
Well, that's basically the Brighton mold, isn't it? Is that they've gone
Yeah,
out into these like, particularly you look at the lads that they've picked up from Ecuador and places like that. Alexis McAllister, they plucked straight out of Boca.
I think it may have been,
Can't
yeah,
remember.
because his granddad played
Karim
there, right?
Matoma straight out straight out the J League, with Karim Matoma, and they've got a great track record of doing that. And then basically what they do is they skip that middleman, and all of a sudden you buy the player for a few mil, and then you get that massive resale price. And so, yeah, it's not an easy thing to do to go and scout well in those leagues, because I think clubs are waking up to the value of their players. Obviously Endrick is the prime example now, but there is good value to be found in those South American leagues. And so, yeah, it would be nice to go and see us skip that middleman, mate. But so many of the top clubs are sniffing around there now. It's easier said than done, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, just a final note on Weston as well. He's a goal threat as much as Douglas Luiz is, both of which throughout their entire career have been involved in 20 goals, 13 goals and 7 assists for Weston. And I think it's I've got the shot on target percentage, and he's averaging about 31.7 of his shots end up being on target, which is kind of around where we're at with Dougie and Guinea and Booba as well. So just some more stats to kind of contextualize the kind of player he is. He's somebody who likes to just run with the ball and be free, and definitely operates best in a double pivot. And I just, please get this done. And as you say, mate, American owners, it makes sense. And like, if I'm thinking like as well, if I'm taking my Villa hat off, I'm thinking, sort of some corporate synergy. Las Vegas Villains is going to be a thing within the next sort of 3 to 5 years. We haven't heard too much on that, but it would make sense for the head of the NSWE, sport club portfolio that obviously includes a Portuguese club and Villa, and then Las Vegas Villains, to have an academy where you're sort of getting all of the best American players in at Las Vegas, and they can see that an American is at the pinnacle of football in the Premier League, playing for Aston Villa. That's the kind of thing that they would want, and it would make sense. Which is another reason why I wouldn't be against signing Christian Pulisic if that ever happens. I would actually quite welcome Christian Pulisic. I think he needs to probably step down from Chelsea and come to a Villa or maybe a Newcastle or a club like that where he would probably play more regularly. And I do think he's a player that would thrive under Unai Emery, probably in the Watkins Bailey sort of spot in that side. But it'd be interesting to see what happens with this with Weston, mate. I know you're hoping it will happen. I know I'm hoping it will happen. And hopefully it's a busy January, mate.
Yeah, hopefully, mate. Hopefully, a man can dream. We are 3 days in, and it looks like the cogs are slowly starting to churn into motion. So let's see, mate. Only upwards from here.
Absolutely. So, guys, if you aren't already, make sure you subscribe. The growth has been crazy. We're giving away 2 shirts at the end of the month. So don't you worry. There will be details on that nearer at the time. And yeah, if you haven't already, make sure you're following our TikTok and Instagram. TikTok is at Heart of the Whole. Instagram is at Villa Filler Pod. That way you'll never miss any short updates from Dan and I. And yeah, hopefully we beat Wolves. Hope maybe you're watching this after that, and hopefully we've beaten Wolves. No preview for that one. There's just been such a short turnaround. So yeah, there'll be a preview for Stevenage, which I think is next. But yeah, if you enjoyed, hit a like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more. Up the Villa.